Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us in this week's Society Talk, in which we are looking at the area of food security. My name is Christabel Phiri from the Southern Africa Trust, who will be facilitating this discussion. Before I introduce the great panel that will be helping me to discuss this issue, I'd like to provide some background and context to this discussion. Firstly, for many African citizens, access to adequate or sufficient food remains a challenge. And so as we talk about the issue of food insecurity, it's not a new concern, because there have been so many factors that have been affecting food production or in general agriculture production. Challenges emerging from climate shocks, which have led to flooding in some of the African countries. We've seen, because of climate change, it has created an environment for droughts. And recently, we've had the outbreak of desert locusts that have been affecting food and agriculture production. And now we are in this crisis with the coronavirus, which has really worsened the situation with regards to access to food, and the availability of food amongst African citizens. We've had a situation where the borders have been closed, and for many African countries, we are dependent on food imports. And so this has been a challenge in terms of the movement of food and the access of food for many citizens. And furthermore, the United Nations is estimating that globally, by the end of 2020, at least an additional 130 million people will be at the brink of starvation. So this is really an opportune time for us to discuss, the issue about food insecurity within Africa, and what is the role of smallholder farmers. And we know that in Africa, smallholder farmers contribute significantly to food and agriculture production. And it's important for us to understand, what are the challenges that they're experiencing and what measures really need to be put in place to address that. I think as an African continent, we need to be moving to a place where we have predictable development measures that are able to address these issues than measures that are really crisis driven. And so I'm very happy to introduce a great panel that will help us to discuss this issue. We have Ms. Mercia Andrews from the South African Rural Women's Assembly. And then we also have Flaida Macheze from the Mozambican National Small-Scale Farmers Forum. And finally, we have Mzinga from the Eastern and Southern Africa Small-Scale Farmers Forum. I'd like to welcome the panelists to this discussion. And so to get us going, I'll start with Mercia. The South African Rural Women's Assembly is such a strategic platform, and the Rural Women's Assembly, because it represents a significant number of women who are involved in small-scale farming. You have representation of peasants, landless women, and they play a significant role with regards to agriculture and food production. But one thing we have seen over the years is that obviously the food and agriculture production from these women small-scale farmers, has continued to decline. Can you share with us really what are the key constraints that women small-scale farmers are facing? And let's look at it in the context of this pandemic and this crisis. What are the key challenges facing small-scale farmers, women small-scale farmers?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity for the Rural Women's Assembly to be on this platform. I think it's really important that we're having this conversation about food security at this moment during this COVID-19 pandemic. And I think it's also important for us to not only have this conversation in the light of the pandemic, but also to speak about the economic crisis, and as you've mentioned, the climate crisis. So despite the fact that small-scale farmers and producers, 85% of them produce the food in Africa and in Southern Africa, mostly they don't get the recognition that they should. And during this crisis, just to give you an example, across the region, we saw measures that government put in place, whether it was to close local markets, to ensure that people didn't have permits to go to their fields, to ensure that there was no, the whole value chain from the small-scale farmer to the local market was disrupted. And for me, this disruption in this value chain is an indication of how little the government understands, how governments understand about the significance of small-scale producers and women producers in particular, despite the fact that they're at the village level, they are the ones that support the produce for the markets. They are the ones that support the local economy. All these factors was certainly not taken into account when there is a lockdown and measures of, or really severe measures are introduced. If you look at the fact for me, which is a real bugbear, that the South African government would say smallholder producers cannot go and produce. And this was across the region. But the retail market, large-scale commercial agriculture, could fill their trucks and deliver fruit and veg across the region, produce across the region. And this is at the hub of the problem. It was just made visible now during this crisis. So another good example of how our governments see the role of small-scale producers, see the role of peasant agriculture, and so on. South Africa had an agricultural relief fund introduced a couple of weeks ago. They set aside a couple of billion rand for this relief fund, and people had to apply. But the ceiling, you could only apply to access support from the disaster fund initially if you had a 50,000 rand a year turnover. We had to intervene, and then it became if you had 20,000 rand turnover. Now, if you assess small-scale producers across our region, very few of them have a formal system where they can document how much they are spending, how much they are making, etc. So automatically, layers and layers of women in particular were excluded from benefiting from such a grant. The same with how governments across the region has used food parcels. So there's a massive investment in food parcels because people are hungry during this lockdown. But who are they sourcing the produce from? Certainly not small-scale producers, etc. So a key issue for me that the lockdown and this pandemic has highlighted was an insufficient knowledge from our governments of how local economies operate, the role of small-scale producers. It's an invisible economy. They don't see the value and the economic contribution of this whole sector of society to to the economy. They only see the manufacturing and the big sectors and so on. So this for me is at the hub. There's insufficient support. Programs like FSIP didn't function effectively. And a last point from me just now is the fact that the Rural Women's Assembly, like some of the partners on this platform today, we promote agroecology. We promote an alternative kind of agriculture. But when government makes available vouchers and resources from which they can purchase seeds or inputs and so on, it is not from these markets that provide traditional seeds or indigenous seeds. No, you've got to go and buy seeds that are from the mainstream market. So everything is weighted against small-scale producers. Hence, there is an ongoing crisis of food, household food security, country-level food security. I stop there.
Thank you so much, Mercia. I think you've raised some very important issues. One which really covers overall is the insufficient consultation and with smallholder producers in terms of what they actually need, and also understanding, where they are at in terms of, addressing some of the challenges that they are experiencing. I think even one of the questions that has come up has been really talking about that aspect in terms of having the bottom-up approach or top and bottom approach in terms of engaging with smallholder farmers. So we'll come back to some of the issues, but I would like to move on now to Flaida and just share your experience in Mozambique. If you could also touch on in terms of what kind of relief measures have been put in place in terms of to support the small-scale farmers. Firstly, what are the challenges that Mozambican small-scale farmers are experiencing? What relief measures have been put in place? And another area that I would like you to touch on is that Mozambique, like many other countries, depends on food imports. What has happened in terms of the pricing situation and how has this impacted on small-scale farmers? Flaida.
Hi, it's good to see all of you. It's good to see you, Mercia. We have been seeing each other sometimes like, okay, 2 times a week, but not now, not now. Well, some issues Mercia have touched because we share this ideology of producing food in an agroecological way. But our issues, what worry us now in Mozambique, it's the fact that our government have not, how can I say, supported our own production, the production of small-scale farmers, and which is the majority. And now we feel it because, food input have increased. How can I say, the food that is being imported from South Africa, the prices have gone up like, 20%. So, and also it has been decreased. So there is not enough food for everyone. And you go to the supermarket, you'll see like maize meal, sugar, and those are the things that the people are looking for. But the majority, the people, the vulnerable people, do not live on this imported food. And we see that this is an opportunity for the small-scale farmers to sell the produce. But also, we have the challenge that our production is not subsidized. So if there is no rain, also you can't get enough production because there is no irrigation. And also, UNAC as a movement, as a social movement, as a small-scale farmers, producers, we have been promoting indigenous seeds, but this is not enough yet to feed the whole country. If we had our own, seeds, for example, would be now producing, but even the seeds, people now are lacking seeds. They go to the shops to buy seeds and there are no seeds because people are going to South Africa to buy seeds to sell to the small-scale farmers. But now they can't cross the border to South Africa. So we lack the basic things to produce. So that's why we say, as a movement, as UNAC, we've been discussing a lot, how can we, use this opportunity, to channel, to produce better, and also to make our ideas,
Flaida? So maybe while we're waiting for Flaida to reconnect, I'll just move on to Joe for you to share from a regional perspective what have been some of the challenges that small-scale farmers are experiencing, coming from a platform that represents farmer constituencies from the Eastern and Southern Africa. What have really been the challenges that farmers are experiencing currently as a result of this pandemic, but also touch on just some of the overall key challenges that Mercia and Flaida have talked about in terms of accessing agriculture inputs. I was just reading a report from Malawi where there is no agriculture inputs because of the closure of borders, and farmers have really been affected. And so can you just share with us your perspectives from a regional organization?
Thank you very much, Krista, and thank you very much, Sat, for organizing this webinar. I really thank you also the panelists. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And for me, I think is good because I have to just go through where they have started talking before I move on. But let me just say clearly that the pandemic is critical and is disposing our countries as far as how they are running the business, the most important business, which is the stomach, which every person needs at least 3 times a day, in the morning and during the daytime, and also before going to sleep. So firstly is to say we are very unhappy because this is also coming when the reports on the biannual review reports on Malabo, the 7 goals that the countries agreed in fact to deliver as far as improving agriculture in our continent. And sadly enough, this came in 2005 in Maputo, even adding more salt to the way how smallholder farmers are being not very happy, the way how the government are conducting their business and neglecting agriculture, which is very, very important in terms of providing employment, is providing for almost 70% of the population in our countries. And the majority are women, as Macheze and Flaida talked about. We see no country in SADC is on track as far as achieving Malabo Declaration. Countries are putting very small amount of money in the agriculture sector in the region. And for this year, probably we can say Angola was trying in terms of investing in the agriculture sector. But if you look at the growth is very, 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 very minimal. So that is the biggest challenge that we see. And we see this is an opportunity and a challenge as well as to the African government. Now, before I go to the challenges that are facing smallholder farmers, the first one in the countries that they have done lockdown and the countries that they have not done lockdown, like Tanzania, is the same challenge, because people first are in fear as far as the COVID-19 is. So the movement to the market, the movement to the village is seriously hindered. And even if food is brought to the urban areas, again the challenge is the market. So moving forward, the problem number one will be marketing. And we know, for instance, that they came out with the guideline as far as crossing the border, but they said trucks with goods can cross the borders, but no passengers. And then we know smallholder traders are majority, in a way, passengers coming across the border with maybe a hen, maybe a sack of maize or so, crossing the border and go to sell according to the market demand. So everything now disrupted. And the biggest challenge I see is awareness. I think people in the rural area, awareness is a challenge. And even the soap, you know, to wash their hygiene and hygiene things, and even the dispensary, they are in the pathetic situation. So we are praying that this situation really does not cross from the urban areas and affect the majority in the rural areas. So let me go back to the challenge that my colleagues have alluded to. Number one, I think, is recognition. Recognition as far as the input that farmers are putting as far as to the exchange, as far as trade is concerned, as far as food is concerned, as far as employment is concerned, as I was said before. So that recognition is not there. And this is again manifesting itself in the budgets. Our budget in the agriculture sector are too small. And so to speak, I think it is sad that South Africa, I think, is the last in the region as far as supporting the agriculture sector. And probably, again, the biggest challenge that we see is, even if these programs that are coming to cushion the small the population, but it's basically focusing on the big industries, forgetting the biggest industry that is supplying raw materials and also supplying food in our countries. And the biggest challenge, and I think this is quote unquote, I think is the best opportunity. I think now, our countries really, if they move out of this pandemic, I think is to know the first thing that we are importing a lot of rice from China and Pakistan. We're importing a lot of edible oil from Southern Asia. We're importing a lot of wheat from Russia and also from France. But I think this is a wake-up call that we need to focus our agriculture internally if we want to be sustainable. In case of everything, we can't move. But I'm happy that we won't be experiencing a lot of fertilizers coming to our region. We won't be experiencing a lot of, hybrid seeds coming to our region. And this again is an opportunity to look at the open pollinated seeds so that farmers can be using and reusing those resources. So in a nutshell, I can say we are not consulted as smallholder farmers, that from the grassroots to the national level, as my colleagues put out. That's why, for instance, we don't see even the government really adhering and enabling that, making sure that they're getting a substantial amount of funds so that agriculture can be supported according to the Malabo Declaration goals. Thank you. Let me stop there.
Thank you so much, Joe. I think you've raised some very important issues that we will still have to come back to in terms of what needs to be done. The issue around financial inclusion and support towards small-scale farmers. The issues around, the food imports from outside the continent. There's limited trade that is happening within Africa. And I think this pandemic is really calling for all of us to look internally to say, how do we begin to even trade amongst ourselves even better? So I would like to go back to Flaida. and ask her to just continue from where she had stopped. I think she was raising some very important issues around the context in Mozambique, the limited availability of agriculture inputs. And I've seen some questions that are coming in, where participants are asking why Mozambique is importing agriculture inputs from South Africa. So I think you ended at that point, and maybe you could continue from there. Flaida?
Hi, internet. But I was trying to say that agricultural inputs are very important even for small-scale farmers, but they are quite expensive. They are expensive because they are being imported. Unfortunately, our governments are not putting money on producing those agricultural inputs from within, from Mozambique. And also, we are not in favor that they should bring us those chemicals because we know that they are killing us. What we need from them is to support small-scale farmers so that they can produce. Now we can talk about food security, but it's when there is a pandemic and there is a disaster. What we are looking for daily, we are looking for food sovereignty, where we can produce our own food, our healthy food in such an organic way, and we can feed our families. Our people should choose what to eat and not just to eat junk food. But what is happening, because our governments do not listen to us, do not consult us and ask us to tell them what is good for us. They keep on importing this stuff which is not good for us. So now we need to bring the food on the table, just like my brother said. The business now of the stomach, we need to bring food on the table, whether this food is organic or not, and we don't have that food. But I see this as a good opportunity to boost our own peasant agriculture. We know, we're realizing that relying on these big, monocultures, it's not good for us because they will give us tomatoes, but we don't live on tomatoes only. We live on many other nutritious products, and those are the products that we want to produce. And also the issue of access to markets. We are limited to access our markets. We are told how many people should be there in the market selling food, but the supermarket, they don't limit how many people should go there buying food, which is imported. Can you hear me? Did you lose me again?
No, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you'll go to Spar. Spar is full of people. But you'll go to the informal markets, they will send a military force to say, go away from this place because it's too full. It's a very dangerous place. That's the place where people go to buy food. They need, and also they don't have money to go to buy food in the supermarket. And also, if you would have money, I wouldn't go to the supermarket to buy a big carrot, which is not good for me. I want the healthy food. And these politicians, whatever name you want to call them, they don't invest on what is good for us. But I hope that now they see why they should invest on peasant agriculture. This is the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Flaida. I think you've raised a very important point, and I just want to pick from the last point you've raised about using indigenous seeds. I was reading a report from Zambia where, for the past 2 years, I think that's 2018, 2019, when they had droughts and were not able to produce. There's been this push towards using modified seeds, and so that they can get quick yields and be able to meet the food needs. And I think this is an important discussion. And going back to Mercia, I would like you to just share with us in terms of what do you think needs to happen. We are still talking about the issues around women having access to land. We are talking now, there's this whole pandemic, but let's talk about some of the overall challenges that women continue to face, issues around access to land, and ensuring that they have the resources to make them become more productive. And also the aspect of, preserving our own indigenous seeds, and what investment needs to be made to actually support that. From your context and from the Rural Women's Assembly, what do you see, what measures need to actually be put in place to support women small-scale farmers?
So I think this is a moment, and already the others have said this, of great grave challenges for us, the pandemic and the economic crisis, but I think it also is a moment of opportunity. And perhaps what we haven't said, and that we should say up front, is that we need to also talk about what is the root of where this pandemic is coming from. And we have to begin to finger commercial, large-scale agriculture. And we need to begin to talk about the way in which we've seen monocropping, land grabbing, all of the destruction of large-scale commercial agriculture. And this is part of what we have to deal with. So if we're talking about alternative seeds, etc., now is the time where we must begin to say we need to reimagine agriculture. We need to reimagine agriculture, which is based on localized production. And that means we've got to support peasant agriculture, smallholder agriculture. We need to begin to rebuild our seed banks, our community seed banks, our indigenous seeds. So there's a lot of investment that must go into a rethinking of how we can build capacity at local level. And in a country like South Africa and in the region as well, we need to say land, particularly land to women who are still the majority, as I said earlier, of producers of food. Women must have access to land, security of tenure on land. They must have land in access to land in their own rights, and they must have user rights. All these kinds of critical issues. This, I think, is central. But similarly, Flaida made a very important point about subsidies. The reason why we have a very slow development of smallholder agriculture is because input costs is very high. To buy seeds, to have the implements, to have the organic fertilizer, to have all those kinds of things costs a lot of resources. And at the moment, our smallholder producers are feeding the household and trying to also sell on the market. And there is just the levels of production, the levels of support is insufficient. And we need to develop that. There must be a conscious program of development of smallholder agriculture. And this isn't available in any of our countries in the region. The Farmer Input Subsidy Program, the FISA program that's supposed to exist to support us, is being undermined by political corruption, by nepotism, by sexual favors, all kinds of problems exist in the farmer input subsidy program, as opposed to using the resources to build local production. This isn't happening. I also think that this is an opportunity for us as farmer movements, ESAFF, La Via Campesina, all of us, to also begin to say we need to begin to demand that we must put a ceiling on food imports. Why must we wait for the truck to come to fill up Spa? Why are we not supporting local production, local food processing, and to have a rethink of how we go from the fork or from the what we produce into the supermarkets and into our households? I think all this whole journey must be reimagined and be supported along the way. We need much more investment in local value addition centers. We need, and in that way, we will also be creating jobs. If you go to a supermarket in South Africa, and you should do this, those of you living in Johannesburg, we are a country where we can fish, but when you buy a tin of tuna on a shelf at ShopRite or Checkers or wherever the case may be, the tin is coming from Philippines. Now, I don't have a problem with the Philippines, but I have a problem that our own fish cannot be processed and sold in our markets. So our governments have allowed trade policies that are not conducive to the development of local communities, local industries, etc. And this is an opportunity to go back to this. And the problems that we have, just to use an analogy, that we don't even in the region in Southern Africa have ventilators, is because we don't have testing kits, or we don't have Panado. We have to get it from China or from India, etc. These are the problems that our governments have created. They've allowed themselves to be bullied into a trade policy that is not conducive to the rest of us. They've impoverished us. They've created an unemployment, layers and layers of Southern Africans and African youth that have no future. And this is what, for me, has to be reimagined. And agriculture is the base of that. We shouldn't be importing baked beans from, don't let me go there, but I just think that we need to improve the strategies for really challenging what we do. Also, how we produce mono fields and fields and fields of grapes to produce wine. Now, I'm not against wine. I enjoy red wine or white wine, whatever the case may be. But the point is, how much land, arable land, do we need for some of those kinds of things, as opposed to growing food? So this is, for me, a moment where we, as movements, must begin to think of our advocacy strategy. This is a moment where we must be thinking of our ways in which we must improve the capacity of our movements, and also push forward for different kinds of seeds, small grains. We don't all have to eat bread in the way that we're eating bread today. We must think about this, rice, etc., etc. We need to begin to ask what can work for us in the region. I stop there. I'm passionate about this issue, so let me not carry on.
Thank you so much. You know, I can spend the whole day with you. So Thank you so much for those inputs. I think you've raised some very important issues, that we need to take forward as a recommendation. I think one key issue is around demanding the ceiling or putting a ceiling for food inputs, which will help us to actually invest more into what we are producing within the continent. Value addition, an important aspects, and the importance of us rebuilding our seed banks, ensuring that we have farmer subsidies that support, farmers to access agriculture inputs. I'll move on to Flaida. I'm looking at the time, and I'll move on to Flaida, and I'll then wrap up with Joe. I wanted you to just share in terms of what do you think needs to be done to ensure that farmers, they are financially included. What measures need to be put in place, which could work for small scale farmers. There are always discussions around women farmers or in general farmers not having sufficient collateral to access financing. Mercia raised an important issue with regards to the relief measures within South Africa and how so many small scale farmers were not even compliant because they don't have all these records, and what measures can be put in place to actually, exempt farmers from having to meet all these administrative or regulatory requirements. What kind of financial support, and packages, and tell us your experience with working with agriculture cooperatives. And I know there are always these village saving loans that are provided to small scale farmers, and what has been the experience from Mozambique?
I see a question here which says, why do Mozambique import seeds from outside? Don't they have seed banks? I think Mozambican government also is facing the system. Capitalism will hold you, will not allow you to develop. You think that you're developing, but you have to always report to someone. You have to always abide by someone's policies. Because see that now, for example, the issue of seeds. You soon will not be allowed to use our own seeds. There is this big fight. So how can you have your own seeds if your own government, if those who say that we want to support you to produce, do not allow you to use your own seeds? Imagine in the situation like this. Nobody has seeds, nobody has indigenous seeds. We rely on these seeds from Monsanto, for example, and there are no seeds. Now the borders are closed. How can you produce? I'm hoping that our governments will wake up. Will wake up some way, because when everything is okay, we relax. Even our governments believe in some ideas, and they even think that we are crazy when we say some things like, okay, we want to rely on indigenous seeds. We are safe with them. We can produce. Imagine in the situation of climate changes, if you don't use fertilizers, you don't use enough water for when you are using these genetically modified seeds or improved seeds, you won't ever yield. But when we use our own seeds, we always have a yield. So I think it's about looking at priorities. Our government should look at priorities. What is important for our government now? When they say, okay, we will invest on agriculture, what do they mean by that? How much money are they going to put on smallholder farmers? Because are the smallholder farmers who feed the countries. It's not the imported food, and it's not only the soya, it's not the sugar cane that feeds the people. People are fed by food grown by smallholder farmers. It's about priorities. And our governments must believe that smallholder farmers are there and they can feed the people if they have the support, which they don't have now.
So I wanted you to just quickly, in 2 minutes, Flaida, just touch on the financial inclusion and what do you think are the measures that need to be put in place to support farmers better, especially with regards to financial institution providing loans, and what kind of exemptions should be put in place, for them to access some financing.
Our final institutions in Mozambique, for example, if you are a smallholder farmer, you won't get a loan because they don't believe that you will produce and pay back. You don't have subsidies. You're not subsidized. If this year it rains only once, you won't have a yield, you won't produce, and you won't pay back. So we don't have, you don't have a door open for a loan, for financial, support in Mozambique. If you are, a big farmer, of course you have collateral. You'll go to the bank and they will give you money. For example, now there is a lobby for masks, for more other things, but our governments never thought about how are they going to put money to produce food in our countries in such situation where we are depending on South Africa, where South Africa, the borders are closed. So it's something that our governments must put on the table. And it's not because they don't know. Somehow they believe on other things, not on what we think that it's important for us. We don't have loans. We don't have loans because we are small-scale farmers and we don't have collateral.
Thank you so much. I'll move on to Joe, and I would like you to just wrap up in terms of saying what are the key policies that or measures that for Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, to put in place to actually best support farmers post this pandemic. I think there are 4 key areas that have been discussed. Is access to agriculture inputs. We've talked about access to financing, access to markets, which is critical for small scale farmers, and what interventions need to be made. What does SADC need to do to support small scale farmers in this context when we have this pandemic and post this pandemic? What needs to be done?
Thank you very much, Krista. I think the first thing that I would like to emphasize very much is what my colleagues have spoken about. I think here we need disruptive thinking as far as agriculture is concerned. We need new thinking in terms of agriculture, because the industrial, the monoculture seems is not working in the countries. Even South Africa, a few years ago, they were moving towards supporting small scale farming, because they know that is a quick one in terms of ensuring equity in the country, but also ensuring that majority of the people, they are benefiting and they are coming very quickly out of the poverty line. We don't have industries in Africa to employ the majority. So we have to start with a small scale agriculture moving forward. And that's to say we need really quantum change as far as agriculture is concerned, because the biggest problem that we have in our country is that we have policies that are made in the north. Or even if sometimes we're trying to do the policies in our countries, they have to have a leaf or maybe sponsored from the north. And that's the biggest challenge. All the policies really are reflected as far as the north, as far as the international institutions are concerned. And let me put forward very clearly here. I don't see the AU responding as we would have expected. I don't see the EAC responding as we would have expected. I don't see the SADC responding as we would have expected. There is a big shift, a shift of thinking. And this is maybe, so to say, I was looking at the website of the World Bank last week. They have hit 100%, 100 countries in the world supporting on this COVID-19. And I think if someone is paying, you have to have written a proposal, isn't it? So the proposal should have reflected what really the Western response as far as COVID is concerned. So that's why we see a lot of lockdown. That's why we'll see a lot of food passes. And maybe we would have come out with a concerted effort and a concerted Africa in a way if we have agreed that we have to close, our air, so that to ensure that Africa is safe. But I think we didn't have that concerted effort as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And this is probably looking at the numbers, 100 countries, and most of them from Africa. I think there is a push or a hand from the international financial institutions, which are coming always with the conditions. So that's number one. A trade, even in Africa, we don't see, even in SADC, we don't see coming to that level, even in Asia, where they're about 30 to 40%. We are still at 15%. That's why we are still even fighting among ourselves. We haven't yet opened up. And this, so to speak, what I can say is the pandemic also has a positive side as far as agriculture is concerned. And basically, as my colleague put, food is not just portion, shima, or ugali in a way. But I think we need to have that diversified to ensure that we have immunity among the citizens. And it's very sad to say that in SADC we have about 40% malnutrition in some countries, 38% malnutrition, 25%. I mean, quarter of the country, the children, as far as I'm concerned, they are stunted. They have malnutrition. So, which kind of generation that we are putting forward to help us moving forward? Which kind of leaders we are grooming today to come and lead us with that level of malnutrition and with that level of stunting in our countries? So what I'm trying to say in terms of moving forward is, first of all, we are divided very much as SADC. We don't see that unit. We see stigma. One country shouting to another country in a way, as if, it's really, we are pushed back to pre-colonial era. So what we need to see moving forward, I think we need now to think internally as far as stopping inputs and to see how we can produce and add value to one another. There is no point whereby you have to input rice or wheat from the north, edible oil, and even fish from China when you have a lot of water in SADC region. I think more than if you combine all the fresh water in the world. If you take the DRC to South Africa, we have a lot of fresh water, which we could have fish and get food and avoid malnutrition and stunting and keep our money in our countries. So what I would like to see changed, first of all, is to see that the Malabo is really fulfilled among our countries. And we see that whoever has food will have a say moving forward. We remember, for those of us, in 1973, I think, when the Southern Africa had the biggest famine, in the way how the US did, say, we are not going to send food to Southern Africa. And we have to avoid that one by ensuring that we produce internally. And secondly, we need to ensure that we have this, we agree with the African Organic Resolution in other countries so that we can produce food organically. I think more and more countries and more people are looking to have this healthy food, so to speak. Why should we having this hybrid and purely GMO food in our plates? And secondly, the SADC has no extension policy, agriculture and extension advisory policy. We need to have it put in place so that we can see concerted effort as the extension is concerned. But this extension should be focusing to make sure that we are food secure, to make sure that we have healthy food, and not just because we have a lot of resources in our continent. And the seed, I think the seed policy also needs to be scrapped or looked at, because it's focusing, first of all, a farmer managed seed system is not really recognized. They will say this is just grains. This is not really seed. So I think we need to change that thinking and look at it positively. First, to ensure diversity. Even in the research institutions, they're focusing on paddy, they're focusing on maize. You see, and that's carbohydrate, not really focusing on small grains, as my colleagues talked about, not focusing on fruits. You see, now the COVID-19 is saying, if you want to boost your immunity, take a lot of ginger, take a lot of lemon, take a lot of red onions, take a lot of garlic, and you can produce them here. You see, so that's what I would like to say, that we need really to make sure that we fulfill the Malabo, Number one, we need to put in place the agricultural advisory and extension policy in the region. We need to look again at the seed policy in the SADC, and also make sure that we reduce import and produce substantially within the region. And also, most importantly, we need to have this, the African spirit within the SADC, which is really going away now.
Thank you so much, Joe. You've raised some very important recommendations. And as we are drawing to the end of this discussion, I would really just like to highlight some of the key points that we're taking forward and which we'll use to continue to engage policymakers in our different platforms, including the various stakeholders that have joined us for this discussion. Firstly, I think there is need for priority to be placed on smallholder producers. And we need a lot of consultation amongst policymakers and farmers to really understand what are the needs of small-scale farmers and how can they best be supported. We've talked about, the importance of having farmer subsidies to support smallholder farmers in terms of access to agriculture inputs. We need the extension services to be provided to smallholder farmers. And then obviously it's investing in our seed, rebuilding our seed banks, that is priority. And there's an opportunity for us to actually diversify, and not focus on only specific seed, but diversify into other agriculture food products in the context of rebuilding our seed banks. We've raised issues around access to financing, and measures that can be put in place. I think one of the issues that has really come up in the context of this pandemic is that the lack of safety nets to support smallholder farmers. I think one of the issues that I've continued to raise with other stakeholders is that there is no focus even on the well-being of the farmer themselves. So we're talking about what they are producing, but what about their own well-being, their access to information around this COVID pandemic? Are they even having access to the right nutrition? Who is actually checking on the small-scale farmers in that context? So I think there also needs to be a focus on that. I think the emphasis around looking at increasing agriculture commodity trade within Africa, and not relying on food imports from outside the continent, and ensuring that that is put as a priority. I think the pandemic has also created the opportunity of how we integrate the youth. I think Mesha made reference, how do we begin to integrate the youth in the context of agriculture and food production, and how we continue to engage with the African Union and SADC and East African community to ensure that they prioritize the needs of smallholder producers. I think there have been so many comments and questions from the participants, which we will continue to engage even post this discussion. But I would like to take the opportunity to really thank our great panelists, the great women and one great man that really made time to be part of this panel discussion, and how we are going to take forward these recommendations and comments that have come from the participants to continue to engage in various policy dialogues. So I want to thank you all for joining us, and look forward to another opportunity to engage on these issues. Thank you all. Thank you so much.